Next we have Kathy Martin. Kathy is both an civil engineer and a petroleum engineer. Kathy is from Oklahoma. Kathy has done a lot of work in both the Cafo area, the industrialized animal production, as well as the Marcellus Shale, and also has researched a lot with the biosolids as well. So with that, I'll let Kathy come up. She's prepared a PowerPoint. Please welcome Kathy Martin.
Okay, I'm going to use try to talk into the microphone. Can you guys hear me? All right. And Michael, you're doing my slide? Yes. I have a bachelor's degree in petroleum engineering and a master's in civil. I started fighting CAFOs back in 1997 after I had worked for the state of Oklahoma, writing regulatory language for industrial wastewater disposal in surface impoundments and land application, and I worked on the #1 Superfund site in the United States, the lead and zinc mines at Tar Creek, which I think Charlie was talking about, was one of his lawsuits. And I worked for government for about 6 years. And I will tell you that there are good people in government, as there are slackers. There's a variety of reasons for people to go into public service, but when you are in public service, it is an honor to serve the citizens, and you should do a good job. But I just at one point found out that wasn't really how I wanted to live my life. So I went out on my own, and within about a year, I accidentally became interested in CAFOs, and I've been doing it for 15 years now, full time, and so I'm an expert in poop, and my parents are very proud. So anyway, and then just coincidentally, several years ago, I got involved with Stronger Board, which is a nonprofit organization that does third-party audits of state environmental regulations related to oil and gas exploration. And that was because I was a petroleum engineer, and I happened to know some people on the Stronger Board through other social activities, professional societies. Anyway, I got on that board, and one of the topics that came up during my tenure on that board was hydraulic fracturing. And it awakened the sleeping giant in my head. I hadn't done petroleum engineering for so long. My parents had an oil company in Mississippi. I had spent so much time on agriculture issues, so I started reading about it on the internet, and ran across people like Texas Sharon and some people that were fighting down in the Barnett Shale in Texas. And I said, Maria, this Marcellus Shale thing is going to be awful, because what's going to happen is thousands of people are going to get pissed. They're going to want to go to their state legislature, their local government. They're going to want bigger setbacks. They're going to want to have moratoriums, and they're going to run flat into this steel wall of industrial lobbies and not going to know what's hit them. And we need to go find these people and help them understand what we endured fighting CAFOs, fighting billion-dollar corporations in agriculture, and help them through the process and make sure that everybody survives the extreme disappointment that happens when you find out your state and local government cannot help you. Okay, it's an extraordinary, almost a state of mourning in the community. And so we said, let's go out and seek these people and let them know that they are not alone. Okay, you're never alone fighting for your rights. And with today's, I started fighting CAFOs when we faxed to the local business supply office, and then we had to run there during 8 to 5 to get a copy of it. We didn't have cell phones or Twitter or any of this garbage. We had to do it eyeball to eyeball, and it was very hard for people to understand that they were not alone, that there were hundreds of thousands of people fighting CAFOs, hundreds of thousands of people fighting hydraulic fracturing all over the world now. So anyway, next slide. That was my little soapbox there. So that's how I ended up in Pennsylvania helping Maria, because Maria called Terry, and Terry said, go help Maria fight a CAFO, and the rest is history. But what I'm going to talk about today is what all industries like to do, whether it's CAFOs, whether it's hydraulic fracturing, whether it's power production. is they like to externalize the cost of waste disposal and privatize the profits. Okay, what does that mean? They make all the money, you as a community pays for cleaning up the mess. Okay? This is what we're up against. It's no new story, and it's not going to go away, so you just get used to it. Now with CAFOs, what we're talking about is it's regulated by the federal law, the Clean Water Act, and the way it was written was when the CAFO portion of the Clean Water Act was written years and years ago, the main problem was a stormwater runoff pond from a CAFO feedlot, a big cattle feedlot. And so rain would fall on the dry manure, and there'd be contaminated stormwater runoff that would go to a creek. Okay, so then the Clean Water Act said you have to build an impoundment to capture that runoff. Okay? But what we're facing today is absolutely nothing to do with that type of animal production. It's housed animal production with liquid manure systems, not dry manure systems, in the tens and thousands of head, and not hundreds of head. And it's not by creeks. This is more of a threat to groundwater, but then the land application of all the manure is not just one creek, it could be dozens. It could be the entire watershed that is affected. The Clean Water Act language was not geared to handle that type of a livestock production facility. So what we're dealing with is this antiquated idea of trying to put it in modern industrial agriculture. It doesn't work. And so, of course, back in the day, 20, 30 years ago, manure was fertilizer. It was wonderful. But as a dry manure, it's better, okay, because the nutrients are captured in an organic material. It takes a longer time for it to dissipate into the environment. But with large-scale dairies, large-scale hog facilities, some of your egg-laying operations, the manure is liquid, where they mix the feces and urine together. And when you mix feces and urine together, there's actually a chemical reaction that occurs that causes some of those pollutants to become volatile, more mobile, right? When you keep the urine and the feces separate, that does not occur. Does that make sense to you guys? Yeah. And then you add water, then it becomes a very liquid system. It's highly mobile. Some of these things are, of course, volatilized in the atmosphere. But the Clean Water Act is not geared to deal with that. It has a very very lovely idea that manure is a fertilizer. But the problem is animals don't poop in a balanced fertilizer. They poop more phosphorus than they do nitrogen. And the Clean Water Act was geared towards land application according to crop uptake of nutrients. Okay, it used to say nutrients, and then they want to focus on nitrogen because word got back, oops, by the way, it doesn't, there's more phosphorus than they need, so just say nitrogen, don't say nutrients. And so whenever you land apply according to nitrogen in a nutrient management plan, you're going to be land applying phosphorus 2 to 8 times more than what that crop needs. Okay? And all of us that are thinking about regional watersheds, phosphorus is a limiting factor for algal blooms, etc. And there is the phosphorus aspect of CAFO manure is the least regulated part. The other thing I want you to understand is, once again, this is about land application of manure, thinking about old dry solid manure. But liquid manure is just captured and stored in concrete tanks or lagoons. It's not treated. It's not analyzed carefully for what's the pollutants are in it. It's only treated as if it's nitrogen. They don't want to talk about the pathogens that are in it, or the salts, or any type of metal like an arsenic, etc., that might be in the feed. Any undigested medicines, any hormones, etc., that might have been fed to the animal. All of those are in the liquid manure, and all of that is land applied on the land. Same with the biosolids. It sounds very quaint, but depending on what kind of industry was in your town, that municipal wastewater treatment facility could have heavy metals. It could have the wash water from a photography studio versus some other light industry. It's not just your poop and urine and your dishwasher liquids and your washing machine liquids. It has commercial and industrial wastewater as well. And the biosolids comes from the primary and secondary removal of solids in the wastewater treatment plant. So it's coming from the grit chamber, which is where they take out the dirt and heaviest things that will fall out right away. That's dried. It's one type of classification of biosolids. Then the wastewater goes through the plant, and there may be some chemicals added, change the pH, precipitate out some waste. that precipitant comes out of the primary clarifier. It's pulled out and dried. Then you're starting to get into what they call biosolids that's land applied. But whether they're precipitating out or metals, okay? They're using different types of complex molecule that will create bigger tufts of precipitate that creates a blanket that pushes all of the solids to the ground. And then the bottom of the clarifier is scraped. So it's all kinds of things that were dissolved in the manure, in your human manure, or from your dishwasher, from your washing your car, from runoff from the street, certain industrial wastewaters from the local businesses. All that is the biosolid. So no longer sounds very warm and fuzzy, does it? It's awful. Okay, it can, and depending on if it came, if it came from New York City, when we have this thing, or whether it came from a small community that had no industry, it's not equivalent, but it all has one name. Okay. Give a little plug to the biosolids people. I feel so sorry for them because they are. By the way, we as a community and as a nation, we have to get rid of our waste. We are also defecators. Okay, we are also people who generate wastewater. And we pay for this treatment with our tax dollars. But we can't be so ignorant that we go home and just flush the toilet or use the water in a community and not realize that that waste is going to end up somewhere, in a landfill, in the ocean, in the watershed, and on people's land. And so we need to insist that there's better treatment, okay? And also our own wastewater. Think of all of the undigested medicines that we take, the estrogens, the Prozacs, these things that are also in the watershed. So while we critique the corporate ag, we also have to understand we're a contributor. Okay, next slide. In CAFOs and in hydraulic fracturing, there's almost but CAFOs we'll talk about first. What are you? Oh, you're not in the right one, sorry.
The right PowerPoint or what?
Yeah, it's not the right PowerPoint. Mine looks way better than this one. I'm glad I looked up. It was called, All right, well, don't worry about it, just turn it off. Sorry about that. Now you just have to look at me. You're probably like, what is she talking about?
Psychedelic.
I have no idea what, that was like an old slide. I fixed it all on my iPad and I sent it by email, but I am over 50, so that meant it didn't work. Okay. If I had had Michael do it, it probably would have worked. The deal with CAFO waste is there's a phraseology. There's PR, okay? And what they hire people to help sell this waste, that it's good. I have been in courts and testifying in courts where when I called it a waste or a pollutant, the other side objects that I am making a legal determination by calling it a waste, that it has a beneficial use, that it's manure. So, and this is crazy, because of course they consider it a waste. The CAFO operator, they will sell it to the community. This is a valuable fertilizer. People will stand in line to get it. They'll pay top dollar for this. La 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 la. Okay? But in the end, there's nobody coming back for seconds. All right? Because everybody can get sold once. But as Bush says, then the rest of it, whatever the saying goes. Okay. You can be sold an idea and you sign a contract and yeah, I'll take this manure, but what you're going to find out, especially with liquid manure systems, is very high in concentrated salts, especially bicarbonate. And bicarbonate acts on the plant in the way that it is absorbed into the plant in the same place that the nitrate would have been absorbed. So it reduces the crop's ability to uptake the nitrogen for growth. And depending on how salty the wastewater is, you could have a reduction in crop yield by 25% or greater for corn. Unless you have what the USDA calls a flushing rain, meaning a huge rain event right after you land applied this valuable manure. then it would not cause a reduction. And you see how this is a very strange logic. And what happens is the farmers that have taken it, they are stuck in this amazing community. You guys all have your crops out. You drive around, you see everybody's business. You drive, you see how high their corn is. You see how well their soybeans are doing. And there is this mentality to maybe give him some privacy, okay? So when he doesn't get the right yield, you don't really know it. I have asked farmers for a decade now, can you tell if he's getting a good yield, this guy that used the hog manure? Oh, well, I'd have to check out, or you know, because it's personal, right? It's not done to ask. So here's the guy who's got a reduced crop yield. He was the one that was all boisterous and saying, oh, I'm going to get all this great fertilizer, blah, blah, blah. In the end, it hit him in the pocketbook. Maybe he'll blame it on the weather. Maybe he'll blame it on something else. But in the end, everyone has a sneaky suspicion when they go to bed at night. Was it because that manure didn't do what it was supposed to be doing? Okay? And then what we find out is in the communities where the Cafos are doing this for the land applying for a long time, the lands start to get to narrow. They start doing it on the same land over and over and over and over again. Why? Because if I'm going to ruin a piece of land, I'll just ruin one piece of land. It'll be a sacrificial zone. And then nobody is watching them to see if they're applying their nutrient management plan correctly, if they're over-applying on that land. You guys know because you live next door. You go, I've never seen him go farther than a mile from his place. He always goes to the same place. But we have no mechanism as a community to contact the EPA or the state and have them know that this manure is going to the right place. Do you know why? There's no national registry of where manure goes. Nutrient management plans were voluntary for years. Now they're required, but they're kept at the facility. No state or federal agency is really looking at this. They're not creating a database. You know, under the NPDES program, if you have industrial discharge, every permit requires some sort of monitoring. It's submitted with a self-monitoring report to the state agency. They enter it into a database. It's a national database that can be accessed by EPA and other states. That is not the case with livestock manure. Okay? Now I'm going way off on talk and you don't even know it. think this. I got involved when we had the salmonella and the E. coli in the spinach. Remember, it's been 8 years ago, right? Oh, well, it must have been the cows grazing next door. No. E. coli 157 only comes from confined animals like cows and beef cattle that are fed corn. It's not a good diet for them. It changes the pH of their rumen. It allows the E. coli 157 to flourish. The animals are asymptomatic. There's no need for the farmer to fix this problem because the animal doesn't die. But it excretes 157. When it gets on the crops, okay, so the first thing they said it was the grazing animals next door. No. Then they said it was the farm workers defecating in the field, which I find extraordinarily insulting. Okay, number one, they are not animals. Okay, number two, the entire state of this was spinach from California. The entire state of California was dependent on these workers, and to treat them as if they were the source of E. coli 157. If they were, the greatest number of cases of illness and death would have come from that community. All right? The other thing is, if that was truly the case, then that particular group of people had the most extraordinary resistance, right? And we should find them, and we should find out genetically why. And we should marry them and have babies with them. And you know what I'm talking about. Some people don't, they don't see it all the way through. They just find a reason to hate someone and to blame. And then it was at the feral hogs. Oh, please, come on. In Salinas Valley, California. But what it was is that I was spent like 40 hours on the internet. I finally found it. There's a nice little company down south called Foster Farms, the largest dairy producer in the state of California and also the largest egg producer. And he had a little press release a couple of years before that said his composted dairy manure was so fantastic that it was worth the money to truck it 100 miles up to Salinas Valley and land apply it on the fields. Okay? I'll get your question later. And this is what we don't know. We have no way. But then what you heard from the USDA was, it came from the plant that cut the lettuce, all right? That it was on the outside of the lettuce because somebody pooped and didn't wash their hands. I mean, it was so obscure how they were forcing this argument. But actually what happens to bacteria, it is called internalization. The bacteria is pulled up from the soil, from the manure that was land applied, and it is drawn up inside the plant. Okay? Internalization. I Googled and Googled and Googled. When I found that word, and then I started Googling internalization of pathogens, whole new world. You know what the oldest documented case of internalization is in the 50s with Cafo. Internalization of pathogens inside the fruit. Cantaloupes, cucumbers, lettuce, radishes, bean sprouts. It's not on the outside of the plant, it's on the inside of the plant. And Duke University did a study with a fluorescent E. coli 157 with a laboratory-grown lettuce, and then used electron microscope to find 45 micron slices, and it was inside the veins. Okay, this is, okay, I'll stop there. All right, how much more time do I have? What? About 10 minutes? Okay, I'll go quickly. I want to talk a little bit about, I've been fighting CAFOs for 15 years in 21 states. I've been working with people, a lot of people in this venue and throughout the country. And what happens is we go to exert our right to protect our private property, and what you're told is that you live in the country, it's supposed to smell this way.
Yeah.
Okay? This is where animals are raised. You just don't get it. We're trying to feed the world. Okay? Let me tell you something. When I first started as an engineer, all I cared about was whether or not they were doing good engineering. All right? I didn't get the fact that everybody deserves clean air and water. You should not be ridiculed for demanding clean air and water. A business, okay? We have known, for hog CAFOs, for example, Dr. Zahn back in the 1990s did a laboratory analysis. He went to many different hog farms. He took air samples. He did GC mass spec analysis of the gases, and he identified 150 gases, okay? Done deal, that's it. That's what it is. The Sierra Club tried to get him to speak at one of their national meetings, and he would love to. And his university was contacted by the USDA and said, we're sorry that was funded by the federal government, and we do not want him to speak for the Sierra Club. And he was not allowed to speak about his research. This is back in the 90s. Okay. Dr. Zahn should live in infamy, but he is not he was the first, but he was not the last to identify these gases. And of course, we have many other great researchers out there, Johns Hopkins, Duke. There's a lot of good schools that are trying to teach us what is in this. It's not just odor. It's air pollution. It's ammonia. It's a hydrogen sulfide. It's the stuff that stinks is butyric acid, propionic acid. These are things that are in very small concentrations that are chemicals that are made by the degradation of organic material, the decay of death. It's a smell of death. When that smell is in your body reacts in an appropriate manner by wanting to flee, because you should not be hanging around dead things, correct? Okay, that's what you're finding in your own home, and that's not right. They don't want to talk about it because it's not a regulated air pollutant, but it is an indicator of organic decay. About 5 years ago, EPA tried to deal with air pollution from CAFOs by issuing the very first, and never to be repeated, national compliance order, meaning they told all the livestock facilities in the United States, You are all of you on notice that you are all in violation of the Clean Air Act. It was never been done before as an industry-wide compliance order, and from that industry had a freaking cow. Things, okay, we're gonna offer amnesty if you would let us come in and sample and analyze your air pollution. Ding, bing, boom. Before you know it, there was a project where Purdue University was supposed to do the analysis. Then it dropped off the radar. We never heard about it again. And then all of a sudden, the project comes back up, and it was abandoned under the Bush administration, and then was tries to be resurrected. And now we have a replacement program of each state needs to tell the EPA where their CAFOs are. I mean, it was something completely off the beaten track. Just let you know. Okay, I'm going to stop. I do want to tell you a few more things that are interesting with CAFOs, and it's very similar to fracking. But all of the waste that is generated either evaporated, seeps into the groundwater, or it's land applied, right? So when it's land applied, if there's contaminated stormwater runoff, that is not considered pollution under federal law. When that is, in fact, the very pollution that caused the Clean Water Act to be written in the first place. That 60% of contaminated stormwater runoff in the United States was from livestock facilities, and that was the impetus for writing the Clean Water Act. I'm sure you all see the problem with that logic. The other part of it is groundwater pollution is allowed, okay? The federal government under NPDES does not handle groundwater pollution from CAFOs. That's handed off to the state. And all states will allow pollution up to the maximum contaminant level, which means that they will allow feces and urine into the groundwater until the pollution is to a certain stop. Then they say stop, but you and I know they don't shut down facilities. So groundwater pollution is allowed. They say it's not, but it's allowed. And I could go into technical reasons why it is. So fracking follows the same path. Number one, and I got a big argument with a friend of mine, but there's federal laws about fracking. And I said, there are no federal laws on oil and gas exploration. There just isn't. RCRA, the hazardous waste law and the solid waste law of our United States, the preamble to the law, the entire preamble is why the oil and gas exploration business is exempt from that law. Even though the majority of waste materials that are regulated as hazardous come from crude oil, okay? State law, I told you I was on a board that looked at state laws for environmental regulations and trying to put down like guidelines, and then we compare the state to these guidelines. Every state law has minimal environmental protections from oil and gas exploration, and they have very little to none on the hydraulic fracturing. And of course, you know, here in Pennsylvania, what I feared was correct, that once you guys started protesting hydraulic fracturing, you have your own version of Act 38, which is taking away local control for setbacks and bans or moratoriums. And as you know, just like with CAFOs, you are fighting this billion-dollar industry that has these fabulous TV ads and billboards and speakers and that say how great natural gas is. It's the transformation fuel. It's better than coal. Blah 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 blah. And it's energy independence. All of this red, white, and blue flag waving apple pie stuff. And that's what the rest of the country hears. And they say it loud enough to drown out your shouts of anger and dismay. That what it is it's completely inundated the state, that no surface owner has any rights, that the mineral owner's rights supersede and trump any attempt by the surface owner to protect their property. You have no or little or no control over where the well is placed, where the roads are placed, who's on your property, when they're on your property, what chemicals are stored on your property. You're ridiculed for asking what those chemicals are. The information that they give on that frac focus, they disguise the information to the point you need a PhD to figure it out. And it's still probably wrong. You know, and when I first saw frac focus through Stronger Board, I saw immediately, you guys would, I said, the public will not know what, all the public wants to know, is there a gallon of acid on my property or 10,000 gallons? Is there a gallon of formaldehyde or 10,000 gallons? I don't care what percentage it is. Just want to know what's coming down the road. Is that funny tank truck Is it full of water, salt water, with the radiation in it? I want to know what's in it when I have an accident with it, right? Or the 18-wheelers with those big plastic deals are stacked up. What chemical is in there? You know, I don't care if it's 0.01% of your recipe. It makes never mind to me. But I want to know if we're talking is 0.01 100,000 gallons or 10 gallons. I want to know the extent of the risk. And I don't want you just piling it up on the land without precautions, without safety measures, God forbid telling your local emergency control people what is there. And I see Maria, she's coming, and I'm a hush. Okay, but I want to remind you guys, because we're coming up on winter, that there is a general permit in Pennsylvania that allows frac fluid flowback to be disposed of as a de-icing agent. Okay, all right. Remember that in New York, 100% of produced water in New York is used for de-icing. Has always been used for de-icing. Okay, thank you. With all that good information.